about the number of hours of sleep required for each individual is different. Is that true? So how many hours we really need for a good sleep, you know?
That's a great question. So typically it's about 8 to 8 hours, right? So if you consider that window of 7 to 9 hours is pretty much what every single person needs, somewhere within that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. Anything less than 7 hours sleep in studies that they've done has basically shown it's too much sleep deprivation or sleep restriction. And we see these negative health consequences that come from not getting at least those 7 hours of sleep. So you can meet it right down the middle and you can say, okay, I'm going to get my appropriate 8 hours of sleep. And yes, you may try for 8 hours and you may not get all of those 8 hours. But really where we see a lot of these negative health consequences that come are people who are chronically only trying to get 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night, right? Because there may be a study that comes out and says, oh, you only need 6 hours. But there is a I always say there's such a small percentage of the population that can get by on 6 hours of sleep that it's essentially 0% of the population. So really, realistically, most of us need to consider ourselves in that window of 7 to 9 hours of sleep. You know, and again, everybody's different, you know, and days are different. If you're doing more activity, you're probably going to need a little bit more sleep, right? You've used a lot more energy, so you need to restore your brain and your body a little bit more, right? If I have a very busy day, it's likely that I'm going to want to sleep 9 hours instead of 7, right? And so it's very important to listen to your body as well and try and determine what's right for you. And as you know, in modern day society, we have so many pressures to perform and do more and more and more and more. And so we sort of tune out to sort of our own intuitive ideas of what we need to do around eating and sleeping and all these sorts of things so that we can try and fit more in during a day, right?
Yes.
And so unfortunately, one of the things that we've seen in the past, you know, probably 50 years or so that's really taken a hit from that is our sleep quantity. So, you know, definitely that 7 to 9 hours is where we need to be aiming. So.
And one question which people, especially in the young generation, are doing is that they're saying that they're covering up their sleep. Let me say just covering up on the weekends. So in the weekdays, they're trying to do 3 to 4 hours because they want to do it all. They want to party late night. They want to go to university and they're doing 12 hours on the weekend. So does that make sense if I'm covering all my hours in the week?
No, no. So unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. We can't make up for it somewhere else. That would be nice if we could. But we even see that not just with kids, but with adults too, right? So they have to get up early for work, 5, 6 a.m. And then the weekend rolls around and everybody sleeps in until 8 or 9. And there's a couple issues with that. A, you're not catching up on anything as far as your sleep goes. And for those 5 days out of 7 that you're restricting your sleep, you are really opening yourself up to a very lot of negative health consequences that come from sleep deprivation. And the other thing is too, we have a natural circadian rhythm, right? So we have a natural wake and sleep cycle that typically goes with the rise and fall of the sun, because that's really the most common denominator that we have. But there's also other things that contribute to our circadian clock. So, you know, eating and stress levels and, you know, all sorts of things like that. But when you try to make up for sleep on a weekend or not get enough, your circadian rhythm really gets thrown off because then your body is really unable to tell, where is our wake cycle? Where did we fall asleep? And so when you have these major shifts in awake and sleep times, it's what we call social jet lag, right? So it's like if, you know, every weekend, you know, I flew across the world, you know, to a completely different time zone. And then I came back Monday through Friday. As you could imagine, if I actually did that and every week I was right, it would be horrible for my health. But that's exactly what people are doing without noticing those consequences of it.
Perfect. What does our light and deep sleep tell us about our brain and our routine? So, because,
Okay. So explain a little bit more what you would like me to explain about that, just so I understand.
So, example, today, if I'm having, I generally try to keep a track of my sleeping patterns. So the number of hours I have deep sleep daily changes. So does that convey something that I should try to maintain on an average in my sleep cycle, or these are just random numbers of hours we are taking in light and deep sleep?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think a lot of it depends too on how we're tracking that, right? So we have different sleep trackers, obviously some that can be better than others. You know, things like I have an Aura ring on, which I don't always wear, but sometimes I wear it, or we have, you know, fitness trackers and things like that. And those are great, right? To give us a general idea about our deep sleep stages, our REM sleep stages, our light sleep stages. Unfortunately, they're just not perfect. And the reason they're not quite perfect is because they're trying to take information about your pulse levels and things like that and sort of try and incorporate it into your deep or light or REM sleep cycles. So really, when we actually look at sleep, the only way that we can actually stage sleep is by doing EEGs, right? So the actual stages of sleep are only based on EEG data, right? Because it's actually brain waves that are telling us what stage of sleep that we are in. So I think sometimes the rapid shifts that people see in deep versus REM on some of these health trackers that we have at home, you know, they're not perfect, you know, so we're not quite getting completely accurate information on what they're giving. But certainly when you look at a full night's sleep window, and if you were to break up the first half of the night and the second half of the night, what you typically find in the first half of the night is you're going to be richer in deep sleep, or that stage 3 slow wave sleep. The second half of the night tends to be richer in REM sleep. Okay. So if you're, let's say you normally go to sleep from 11 to 7, okay, that's your natural sort of, let's just say that's your natural sleep wake window. And that's when you kind of every day go to bed at 11 and wake up at 7. But again, going back to that, you know, missing sleep on the weekday and trying to make up for it on the weekend sort of thing that we just talked about. If instead of going to sleep at 11 now, or I do something like have an argument with somebody right before I go to sleep, which raises my stress levels, or I eat a heavy meal, or something that can really disrupt that sleep pattern in the first half of the night, we're going to be a little bit more deficient in that stage 3 deep sleep. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And same thing, if you're going to bed now at 1 a.m. instead of 11 p.m., it's not that the whole sleep window shifts. You just cut off that part of the night where deep sleep comes. Does that sort of make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're sort of switching so much back and forth between one day I go to bed at 11, then 1, then 10, you know, and your sleep time sort of shifts back and forth, you're probably going to see a big change in that deep sleep.
Okay, so I think Bhavya has a question that what exactly these stages mean physiologically. So I think this answers it. Great. So my next question would be, what can we do to make sure a good night's sleep?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of things that we can do to ensure a good night's sleep, right? And I'd say one of the easiest is finding a natural sleep window that you can stick with, both weekdays and weeknights, weekends, I should say, because we want to make sure that we're maintaining that natural sleep-wake cycle. So that would be one of my number one things I would say. The second thing I always tell people, and again, it's something we already touched on a little bit here too, is always make sure you're giving yourself enough time for sleep. So I treat sleep disorders, right? Sleep disordered breathing. So that comes because people aren't able to get a good quality of sleep. Even if they try to sleep 8 hours, unfortunately, they have so many breathing and respiratory issues while they're sleeping that their quality of sleep is so significantly impacted, right? So, you know, that's a big population that I treat. However, if you're not giving yourself enough quantity of sleep, meaning, again, you're only trying to sleep 5 or 6 hours, that certainly is going to affect your sleep. So that's usually my number one thing. And even for my patients with sleep disorders that we do treat, if we get their apnea under control, they're able to breathe better at nighttime, and they're still coming, they say, I'm still kind of sleepy. And then we go back to their schedule again, and I say, well, when are you falling asleep and when are you waking up? And they're like, well, I go to bed at like 11 and I wake up at 5. And I say, well, you're only getting 6 hours of sleep. You're still sleep deprived, right? Which still leaves you susceptible to all of those consequences of sleep deprivation. So that leaves you susceptible to poor cognition, poor concentration, to cardiovascular disease, to, you know, reductions in your memory and your ability to learn. So if you're not giving yourself that opportunity, it's definitely going to open you up for that. The other things, you know, we have sleep hygiene things that people can do, right? So sleep hygiene for people, which people aren't familiar with what sleep hygiene is, those are things like making sure you're not looking at screens too close to bedtime, making sure you're not drinking alcohol or heavy meals too close to bedtime, or sugar, anything like that, too close to bedtime. But interestingly, they actually came out with a study, and what they showed, they had a group of people who did these sleep hygiene parameters, right? And then they had another group of people that were doing mindfulness and meditation. And they actually found that the group of people who did mindfulness and meditation, their sleep quality improved more so than those that just practiced sleep hygiene. So a lot of times what I'm now telling my patients and what we're teaching in our clinic is how to do sort of those nice contemplative breathing exercises, which I know, of course, you're very familiar with, right?
Yes.
And how much that affects us,
Especially.
right? Because that does, it helps, it really does help to correct the sleep and reduce that anxiety before we go to sleep and all those sorts of things. So like I said, there's a laundry list of things that we could take off that can help sleep quality, but those would be my top ones right there.